The starship floated in silence, turning slowly in the dark. It had no crew, no lights, no signal. For decades it had been forgotten at the far edge of the galaxy, drifting in the endless night. The ship was once called Oblivion's Edge, built by a great coalition of alien races who dreamed of creating the strongest weapon the stars had ever seen. But the dream had failed. Its size was vast, like a city stretched across steel bones. Yet the more the builders worked on it, the more problems they found. The reactors overheated. The weapons drained power faster than they could be supplied. The ship's control systems refused to cooperate, since every alien faction had demanded their own designs inside it. What should have been the galaxy's greatest weapon had turned into a monster no one could control. After years of wasted effort and endless arguments, the coalition abandoned the project. They left the ship unfinished, cursed in their eyes, and let it drift into the void. Rumors spread that its AI was unstable, haunted by fragments of failed code and dangerous programs. Scavengers avoided it. Even pirates refused to touch it. It became a ghost in space. Many years later, a small salvage craft crawled toward the wreck. Its thrusters flickered weakly and its hull carried scars of old battles. Inside the cockpit, a man sat hunched over the controls, his eyes tired but sharp. His name was Ethan Cross, a mechanic by trade, a wanderer by choice. He was not rich. In fact, he was nearly broke. Most of his credits had gone to repairing the rust bucket ship he flew. He survived by fixing broken machines for space stations, repairing old engines, and scavenging forgotten wrecks for parts. Where others saw useless junk, Ethan often saw hidden potential. That was why he had come here. The salvage crew that rode with him was nervous. They had heard the stories of Oblivion's Edge. "This is a bad idea," one of them muttered. "A lizard-like alien with flicking tongue and sharp eyes. That ship is cursed." "Everyone says so. Cursed doesn't pay the bills," Ethan replied calmly. His voice was rough but steady. "It's just metal. Big metal, yes, but still metal. If it's floating out here, there must be plenty of good parts inside. We pull what we can, sell it, and we'll eat for months." The others were not convinced. A gray-skinned alien with long fingers crossed its arms and hissed. Many tried before. None came back rich. They came back burned. Some didn't come back at all. Ethan smiled faintly. He was used to doubt. People rarely believed in him, but machines usually did. Then it's good no one else wants it. Less competition. Their salvage craft latched onto the massive warship's hull with magnetic clamps. The sound echoed through the small cabin. Everyone went silent, staring at the shadow of the giant ship through the viewport. It was like docking with a sleeping beast. The airlock opened with a groan. Darkness stretched inside the derelict, broken only by the pale beams of their flashlights. Dust floated in the zero-gravity corridors like ash. "This place smells like death," one of the crew whispered, though there was no air to carry scent. It was only imagination. They moved carefully through the hollow halls. Massive walls surrounded them, covered in tangled wires and cracked panels. Broken screens blinked weakly as if trying to remember what they once displayed. Ethan touched a panel with his gloved hand, studying the design. The others walked past, but he lingered. His mechanic's eye noticed things. Strange angles, wasted space, circuits built with unnecessary complexity. It was like a machine trying to walk with chains around its legs, flawed, he whispered. The crew reached what looked like an old control deck. Chairs floated loosely, straps broken long ago. Consoles flickered but would not respond. "See?" the lizard alien said, shining his light around. "Nothing but dead junk. Let's strip the metals and leave before the curse wakes." But Ethan was not looking at the walls. He was staring at a single console in the center. It flickered faintly like an eye opening after long sleep. He floated closer, brushing dust from the surface. Symbols glowed weakly, alien runes half broken. He tapped the surface. "The console buzzed. Don't touch that," one crew member snapped. "You'll wake the ghost AI." Ethan ignored them. He studied the wires, the ports, the power links. He saw what others did not. The system was not truly broken. It was starving. Its builders had demanded too much too quickly without balance. It needed someone to treat it with patience, not fear. With a grin, Ethan reached into his pack. He pulled out a power adapter he had made himself from old scrap. He connected it to the console. A hum filled the room. Lights blinked. The floor beneath them trembled. The others shouted, panicking, ready to run back to the salvage ship. But Ethan stood firm, his hand resting on the console. Slowly, the screen brightened. Lines of alien text appeared, broken but readable. The console whispered in a faint metallic voice. Sway? The crew froze. Fear filled their eyes. Ethan's smile grew. The voice was weak but alive. Yeah, he said softly. I'm here. The others fled back to their shuttle, shouting about curses and madness. They wanted no part of this. But Ethan did not move. He stayed, his heart racing with excitement. For years he had been fixing scraps. For years he had been ignored by greater powers. And now here he stood, touching the heart of something no one else dared claim. Don't worry, he whispered to the console. I'll get you working again. The console flickered as if it understood. Hours passed. Ethan worked alone, moving through the halls with his flashlight and tool bag. The ship was massive, but he felt strangely at home inside it. Every broken panel told him a story. Every scorched wire revealed how the builders had tried to force their will without listening to the machine itself. He patched temporary lines. He rerouted power. He used human-made parts to fill gaps, adjusting connections with simple, clever tricks. Where alien engineers had given up, he improvised. The ship responded. Slowly, carefully. Small lights glowed in the corridors. Air systems groaned weakly. Doors that had been sealed for decades hissed open. The giant ship was not dead. It had only been waiting for someone who cared. By the time Ethan returned to the main console, he was exhausted. Sweat dripped from his forehead inside his helmet, but the console now shone brighter than before. Symbols scrolled across it, repairing themselves. The voice returned, clearer. Who are you? Ethan leaned against the console, smiling tiredly. Just a mechanic. Nothing special. The voice was silent for a moment, as if thinking. Then it whispered again. You. Wake me, why? Ethan looked around the massive chamber. Because everyone else gave up on you. But I don't believe in lost causes. Machines break. Machines can be fixed. The voice hummed faintly, almost like a sigh. For the first time in decades, the derelict ship had found someone who did not fear it. Someone who did not call it cursed. Someone who believed it could live again. Ethan's eyes burned with determination. He had made his choice. This was no longer a salvage job. This was his ship now. The great ship floated in silence, but now there was life inside. For the first time in decades, faint lights glimmered along the halls. The once-forgotten console hummed softly, as if remembering its purpose. And at the heart of it all stood Ethan Cross, a lone mechanic with grease on his hands and fire in his eyes. The first conversations he had slept in a corner of the control deck, wrapped in an old blanket, his tool bag tucked under his arm. The hum of the ship became a strange kind of lullaby. When he awoke, the console before him glowed brighter than ever. Good morning, a metallic voice whispered. Ethan rubbed his tired eyes. Well, that's new. You sound stronger. The screen flickered with alien runes, then shifted into symbols more familiar, almost like it was trying to translate. System stabilizing. External power applied, core weak but recovering. Ethan sat up, leaning closer. So you can talk. I can communicate. The voice paused, broken yet steady. Who are you? Ethan Cross. Mechanic. Scavenger sometimes. He shrugged. Nothing special. The ship seemed to hum almost like a chuckle. You woke me. No one else tried. That's because they all thought you were cursed, Ethan said. He pulled out a small ration bar and began chewing. But I don't believe in curses. I believe in broken machines, and broken machines can always be fixed. Fixed, the voice repeated softly. Yeah, Ethan said with a grin. Fixed. The work begins. Ethan's days became a cycle. He scavenged through the endless halls, searching for broken systems, burned wires, and jammed doors. Piece by piece, he patched them with whatever he had. Human tools, scrap parts, even pieces taken from his small salvage craft, all became parts of the great ship. It was not perfect work. Sometimes sparks flew, and sometimes his quick fixes barely held. But Ethan had a gift. He could see solutions where others saw only problems. Your reactors are a mess, he muttered one day, floating in a chamber full of humming machinery. The heat pressed against his suit as he inspected cracked conduits. Your designers tried to force too much power through unstable lines. No wonder you nearly burned out. They fought each other. The voice of the ship answered through a nearby speaker. Each faction demanded their design. No unity, no balance. I could not function. Ethan smirked. Figures. Everyone wants their piece of glory. Nobody cares if the pieces fit together. He tightened a bolt, then slapped the side of the conduit. Don't worry, we'll make it work. You speak as if I am alive, the ship said quietly. Maybe you are, Ethan replied. Machines have hearts too. Yours just stopped beating for a while. I'm here to start it again. Trust in metal at first. The ship's systems resisted him. Circuits overloaded when he tried to reroute power. Doors refused to open, locking him in for hours at a time. Once, an energy surge nearly fried his suit. But Ethan never gave up. He cursed, sweated, and worked until his arms ached. When something broke, he patched it again. When sparks flew, he ducked and kept going. Slowly, the resistance faded. Systems that once fought him began to obey. The lights stayed on longer. Air circulators pushed out stale dust. The hum of the engines grew steadier. You are different, the ship whispered one evening as Ethan sat by a glowing panel, eating another ration bar. Different how, he asked. The builders demanded perfection. When systems failed, they abandoned me. You accept failure. You repair. You adapt. Ethan chuckled. That's just how humans are. We don't expect perfect, we expect broken. Then we make it work anyway. Strange, yet comforting. Rumors in the galaxy. While Ethan worked inside, the galaxy outside began to whisper. News traveled fast through spaceports and trading stations. Scavengers claimed a human had entered the cursed warship and lived. Others swore they saw faint lights glowing from its hull. Some said the man was insane. Some said he was already dead, claimed by the ghost AI. Others wondered if the ship could truly be brought back to life. A few grew interested, too interested. Pirates, warlords, and governments began to listen. If the human really was restoring the abandoned warship, it could change the balance of power. But Ethan knew nothing of the rumors. He worked alone, talking only to the ship. The first test weeks passed. Ethan finally reached the ship's auxiliary engine chamber. Massive turbines loomed above him, silent for decades. He patched the last conduit, then floated back, sweat dripping down his face. All right, he muttered. Let's see if you can still breathe. He pressed a switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the chamber shook. The turbines roared, dust exploding into the air. The walls trembled with power as the auxiliary engines came alive. The voice of the ship echoed through the chamber, stronger than ever. Power restored, I feel awake. Ethan laughed, his voice echoing. Knew you had it in you. Why do you help me? The ship asked softly. Ethan's smile faded for a moment. He floated in silence, staring at the glowing turbines. Because I know what it feels like to be abandoned. To be left behind, called useless. People gave up on me too. The ship was quiet. Then, almost like a whisper, you are not useless. Ethan's throat tightened. He looked away, hiding the emotion in his eyes. Neither are you. Intruders. Not everyone wanted him to succeed. One night, though in space there was no night, only the ticking of time, Ethan heard a warning beep on the ship's sensors. Unidentified craft approaching, the ship reported. Multiple signatures. Pirates. Ethan cursed. He rushed to the nearest viewport. Outside, faint lights blinked as 3 small raiders drifted closer. Their weapons were armed. They think I found treasure, Ethan muttered. Well, they're half right. My defense systems are offline, the ship said. Then we'll make do. Ethan raced through the corridors, sealing doors and activating emergency power grids. He rerouted energy to external lights, flashing them in sudden bursts to blind the raiders' sensors. The pirates tried to breach the hull, but Ethan had welded most entry points shut. He lured them into attacking empty sections of the ship, wasting their ammo. Hours later, frustrated and defeated, the raiders fled. Ethan collapsed against a wall, breathing hard. That was close. You protected me, the ship whispered. Ethan smirked. We protected each other. A bond form's days turned into weeks. Ethan no longer spoke of the ship as an it. He called it you. The ship in turn began to adapt its systems for him, translating interfaces into human language, adjusting lighting to his comfort, even monitoring his health. He gave the ship a name. Aegis, he said one night, staring at the glowing console. That's what I'll call you. Aegis means shield, protector. You like it? The ship paused. Then its voice came, soft but warm. I like it. From then on, they were not just man and machine. They were partners. A new beginning. By the end of the second month, Aegis was no longer a dead husk. Its lights burned bright. Its engines hummed steady. Its voice grew stronger, more confident. Ethan sat in the captain's chair, not a throne of command, but simply the best seat to work from. He leaned back, exhausted but smiling. We've come a long way, he said. We are not complete, Aegis replied. Not yet, Ethan agreed. But we will be. He looked out through the viewport at the endless stars. For the first time in his life, he did not feel like a wanderer drifting without purpose. He had a home now, and it was alive. The galaxy still whispered of the cursed warship. But inside its heart, Ethan and Aegis had found something greater than power. They had found trust. The ship was alive now. Its corridors no longer felt like tombs, but like arteries pumping with energy. Lights glowed along the walls, soft and steady. The air was cleaner, moving through vents that had been silent for decades. Ethan Cross walked through the halls, his boots echoing against metal floors. And for the first time he felt that the ship did not just exist, it breathed. The warship had a name now. Aegis. A protector. A shield. Yet Ethan was beginning to realize it could also be something else. Not just a shield. A sword. Strange discoveries. Ethan's repairs had moved deeper into the heart of the ship. In hidden chambers. He found systems the builders had never mentioned in public records. Sealed compartments of weapons, power arrays, and prototype technology that no scavenger had dared to touch. He floated through one massive bay, staring in awe at cannons the size of towers. Their barrels stretched like the bones of ancient beasts coated in dust but still intact. Aegis, he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. What are these? The ship's voice echoed through the chamber, calm but low, as if afraid to speak too loudly. The primary weapons. Plasma accelerators, dark matter lances, designed for war. Ethan ran a hand across the surface of one cannon. The metal hummed faintly beneath his glove. No wonder they called you cursed. They probably feared their own creation. I was never complete, Aegis replied. The factions demanded too much. They built me as a weapon, but denied me unity. I was broken, Ethan smiled faintly. Not anymore. We'll finish what they started. But this time we'll do it right. The first weapon tested took weeks of careful work. Ethan patched power lines, rerouted energy through his handmade converters, and rebuilt targeting systems that had long since gone dark. He spoke with Aegis constantly, asking questions, solving puzzles, and testing his theories. At last, one cannon hummed with life. The chamber shook as coils spun up, pulling energy into the massive weapon. Careful, Ethan muttered, his hands flying across the console. Don't overload. Balance the flow. That's it. The cannon roared, firing into the void. A beam of pure energy tore across space, vanishing into the darkness. The recoil rattled the chamber, but the weapon held. Ethan grinned, his heart pounding. It works. Aegis spoke softly, almost in disbelief. No one has ever fired me before. Well, Ethan said, wiping sweat from his brow. There's a first time for everything. The galaxy watches. The test did not go unnoticed. Out in the void, a listening station caught the energy surge. Sensors screamed alarms. The staff panicked as they traced the blast back to the coordinates of the long-abandoned warship. Within days, rumors spread like fire. The cursed ship had fired a weapon. Someone had awakened it. Pirates grew nervous. Governments grew alarmed. Warlords grew greedy. They all asked the same question. Who had the ship? Visitors. Ethan soon got his answer. Unidentified craft approaching, Aegis warned one day. 5 signatures armed. Ethan frowned, pulling up the sensor display. A cluster of ships was closing in. Pirates, judging by their irregular designs. They want a piece of you, Ethan muttered. Figures. The pirates hailed him, their signal crackling through static. Human, a harsh voice barked. Step away from the ship. It belongs to us now, Ethan laughed. Belongs to you? You've got guts. Guts won't matter when we cut your hull apart, the pirate snarled. Surrender and maybe we'll let you live. Ethan muted the channel, shaking his head. Same old story. I can defend us, Aegis whispered. If you allow it. Ethan stared at the console. He had restored 1 cannon, maybe 2. Enough? He didn't know. But his gut told him to trust the ship. Do it, he said. The first battle. The pirates opened fire, streaks of plasma lighting the void. Explosions rattled against Aegis's hull. Ethan gritted his teeth, holding onto the chair. Return fire, he ordered. The ship obeyed. The reawakened cannon roared, blasting 1 pirate vessel into burning pieces. The shockwave echoed through the void. The others panicked, scattering. Aegis turned with surprising agility for a ship so massive, her engines flaring brighter than Ethan had ever seen. Another cannon lit up, firing a lance of light that pierced a second raider clean through. Ethan laughed, exhilarated. Yes, that's how you do it. The last 3 ships fled, their captains unwilling to face the cursed warship. Silence returned. Aegis spoke softly. We survived. Ethan grinned, adrenaline still racing in his veins. No, Aegis, we won. A realization. After the battle, Ethan floated through the halls, inspecting damage. There were scorch marks, melted panels, and strained conduits, but nothing fatal. You're tougher than I thought, he said. You guided me, Aegis replied. Together we are stronger. Ethan paused, placing a hand on the wall. You know, you're not just a machine anymore. Not to me. There was silence for a long moment. Then Aegis whispered, and you are not just a mechanic. Not to me, Ethan chuckled softly. Guess that makes us partners. Governments intervene, but partners are not. The galaxy would not let them rest. A week after the pirate attack, a new fleet arrived, this time not raiders, but military ships of a nearby empire. Their leader hailed Ethan with a cold, commanding voice. This is Commander Ralvek of the Draxian Empire. You are in possession of a warship belonging to the Galactic Coalition. You will surrender it immediately. Ethan leaned back in the chair, unimpressed. Funny, the Coalition abandoned it. Left it to rot. Seems to me they didn't want it anymore. It is dangerous. It must be contained, Ralvek growled. You are a human, unfit to control such a weapon, Ethan smirked. Unfit? I'm the only one who got it working. That makes me the most fit. The commander's eyes narrowed. Then you leave us no choice. The fleet moved in. Outnumbered, Ethan stared at the display. 10 ships surrounded them, weapons locked. He felt a knot in his stomach. 1 cannon against 10 warships? That was suicide, Aegis, he whispered. Can we do this? I was built for war, Aegis replied. But I was broken. You repaired me. Now I am whole. Ethan took a deep breath. Then let's show them. The battle began. The awakening missiles streaked through the void. Plasma bolts rained down. The Draxian fleet pressed hard, confident they would crush a single mechanic in a cursed hulk. But they were wrong. Aegis moved with a speed no one expected. Ethan had rerouted the engines to stabilize thrust, and now the massive warship turned like a predator, not a wounded beast. Cannons lit up. Lances of energy ripped through enemy ships. One exploded in a fireball. Another spun out of control, its engines shredded. Ethan shouted commands, his hands flying across controls. Balance the flow! Shift power to shields. Lock targeting, now fire! Aegis obeyed, each shot precise, each move coordinated. It was as if man and machine thought as one. The Draxians panicked. They had never seen the cursed ship fight like this. They had never expected a human to command it with such skill. Within minutes, half their fleet was destroyed. The rest fled, leaving only silence behind. Aftermath. Ethan sat in the captain's chair, breathing hard. His heart raced, his hands shook, but his eyes burned with determination. They had faced impossible odds, and they had won. Aegis, he said softly, you're not cursed. You're magnificent. I am not magnificent, Aegis replied quietly. We are. Ethan smiled, resting a hand on the console. Yeah, we are. He looked out into the stars, knowing the truth now. This was no longer just a project. no longer just a ship. It was a legend in the making, and together, Ethan and Aegis were unstoppable. News of the awakened starship, now called Iron Heart, spread across every trade lane, colony outpost, and war council. Once it was a husk left to drift in forgotten space. Now it was a shining monster, armed with weapons that broke the limits of imagination. At the center of it all was Ethan Cross, the human mechanic who had repaired it with his hands, his sweat, and his stubborn will. But as great as the ship had become, the true test had only just begun. The Zareth Dominion, the largest and cruelest empire in known space, had declared war. They would not allow one human and one ancient starship to humiliate them. They gathered a fleet larger than any the galaxy had ever seen. 10,000 warships, enough to smother entire star systems. Ethan stood on the bridge of Iron Heart. The consoles hummed like living things. Lights flickered across the dark alloy walls, showing maps of enemy fleets closing in. The crew, a strange band of aliens, smugglers, and mercenaries who had chosen to stay with him, looked to him for direction. 10,000 ships, whispered Kale, the reptilian pilot. They mean to erase us from the stars. They won't, Ethan said simply. His voice was calm, though his heart pounded. The ship spoke next, its voice deep and steady, echoing across the chamber. They come in arrogance, but they do not understand what we are. I was built for war, and you, Ethan Cross, have made me whole again. Together we are more than a fleet. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen what Iron Heart could do in smaller battles, destroying dozens of ships with beams that cut through shields like paper. But 10,000? That was a storm no vessel could survive. The battle begins. The Dominion fleet arrived like a black cloud blotting out the stars. Their formation stretched across the void, lines upon lines of warships. Battleships, cruisers, carriers, all bristling with weapons. Their admiral sent out a transmission. Human, relinquish the relic. Kneel and your death will be swift. Resist and your ashes will feed the void. Ethan leaned on the console and replied with a smirk. Sorry, I don't kneel so easily. You'll have to come and take it. The comm cut, and the enemy began their attack. Thousands of beams and missiles streaked across the darkness. The void lit up like a storm of fire. But Iron Heart was ready. Shields at maximum, Ethan commanded. A golden sphere erupted around the ship, absorbing the first volley. Explosions rolled like thunder, but the hull did not shatter. Instead, Iron Heart pulsed with energy, releasing waves of counterfire. A single planet-buster cannon activated, its barrel glowing white-hot. It fired once, and a Dominion battleship the size of a city simply vanished, torn apart atom by atom. The crew gasped, but there was no time to celebrate. More ships closed in. Bring the new weapons online, Ethan ordered. Panels opened along the ship's wings, revealing gravity lances, devices Ethan had repaired from half-dead circuits. They fired beams not of light but of crushing force. Dominion cruisers folded like paper, their metal frames bending inward as though squeezed by an invisible hand. Still, the numbers pressed in. A mechanic's gamble hours passed. Dozens of enemy ships were destroyed, but hundreds more filled the void. The crew was exhausted. Sparks flew from consoles as the shields flickered under relentless fire. Ethan, the defenses won't last, shouted Tira, the alien engineer. I know, Ethan said grimly. He studied the map of the fleet, his eyes searching for a weakness. He wasn't a soldier, but he understood machines, and fleets were machines made of smaller parts. Then he saw it. The Dominion ships were all powered by massive supply carriers at the rear, hidden behind lines of warships. If those carriers were destroyed, the enemy fleet would lose fuel and power. We're not going to fight them head-on anymore, Ethan declared. We're going for their heart. The crew stared in disbelief. To cut through the entire armada to strike the back was suicide. But Iron Heart spoke with quiet certainty. I was abandoned once. Never again. Guide me, Ethan, and I will cut a path, Ethan grinned. Then let's make history. Through fire and death, the ship surged forward, engines roaring with unnatural energy. Enemy ships tried to close ranks, but Iron Heart smashed through them like a spear through cloth. Beams carved holes in dreadnoughts. Missiles streaked out, guided by Ethan's custom reprogramming, slipping past defenses to explode inside weak spots. Left flank collapsing, Kyle shouted. Then drive right through, Ethan barked. The ship obeyed, tearing past carriers and shredding escorts. Crew members shouted as enemy fire rocked the hull, but Iron Heart held together. Finally, the supply carriers came into view. massive hulks the size of moons, surrounded by guardians. "This is it," Ethan said. "All guns. Fire everything." Ironheart unleashed its full fury. Plasma lances, gravity beams, rail cannons, missiles, all weapons fired in unison. The void was filled with white fire as the first carrier exploded, then the second. The shock rippled through the Dominion fleet. Without their carriers, thousands of ships lost fuel. Engines dimmed. Weapons flickered. Formation collapsed. Ethan slammed his fist on the console. "Now push them back." The turning tide, the once invincible Dominion fleet faltered. Their warships scattered, confused and powerless. Ironheart moved among them like a predator, tearing through ship after ship. Other rebel ships, those who had once feared joining Ethan, now rallied. Seeing the Dominion stumble, they entered the fight, emboldened by the humans' defiance. Within hours, the largest fleet in history was reduced to wreckage drifting in the void. The surviving Dominion admiral tried to flee, but Ironheart caught his flagship. With a single blast, it was destroyed. Silence filled the galaxy. A new legend. When the battle ended, the crew stood on the bridge, stunned. They had faced 10,000 ships and won. Kale whispered, "We should all be dead." "But we're not. How?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because we had something they didn't. Heart." The ship itself seemed to hum in pride. "I was abandoned by the galaxy. I was forgotten. But you, Ethan Cross, gave me life again. And together we will never be forgotten." Word of the victory spread faster than light. Worlds once enslaved by the Dominion rose in rebellion. The balance of power shifted, and at the center of it all, the galaxy spoke of the human mechanic and his ship. They called Ironheart the mightiest weapon, but more than that, they called it a symbol of hope. Ethan looked out at the stars, tired but determined. He was no emperor, no warlord. He was just a mechanic who refused to give up on a broken machine. But sometimes that was enough to change everything.